was invisible, so it was very strange.
We can't have that. We need each of you to have your voice for this wonderful event. So I'm glad that you are now here.
Awesome. Yay, we did it. Thank you so much, Diana, for helping kick us off. And we are live on Facebook, so folks can watch there and watch the archive there as well. So Diana, thank you for all your hard work putting this event together. Really, really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and actually have you take yourself off video so we can focus on Todd and Barbara, Todd Gloria and Barbara Bry. So excited to have you. So let's kick off. I'm going to introduce each of you briefly. I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but just a little background and context here, and then we'll kick it off. Just some ground rules, so to speak. We do have 2 minutes for each of the answers. We have 12 questions. And the way I've set it up is, Todd, you will go first for the first 6 questions, and Barbara, you will go first for the second set of questions. So I'll remind you about that when we get there. Jill Roan is our advocacy chair, and she is our fearless timer over there. So you'll be able to kind of see how much time you have left, and I will go ahead and move us along to the next question to make sure that we have time to get through the questions. I will say for folks that are attending, thank you, thank you. I see a lot of familiar faces and new faces. You can participate in this, in that you are going to use the Q&A function, and you can write in questions you have, thoughts or comments in that section. Diana is going to be helping us manage that today. And so if we have time, we will try to get to your questions. If we don't have time, we will archive those questions, give those to both candidates, and allow them to hopefully address those questions as they have time on their channels. So here we go. So Todd, I was excited. I think I knew this, but you went to USD. You're a fellow Torero, San Diego native. And Todd has been in public service his entire career. He started in Health and Human Services. He worked for Congresswoman Susan Davis. He was appointed to the San Diego Housing Commission as well, 2005 through 2008, and then was elected in 2008. That was an interesting year. We all remember quite well. He was elected to City Council. He did 2 terms in City Council. He was the council president. And he was, some of you may remember, the interim mayor for 6 months as well. That was a very eventful time in San Diego as well. And he is the current representative in the 78th District of California State Assembly. He has authored many, many bills, but the topic we're going to be talking about this evening is small business, and apparently has authored several bills to cut through the red tape of small business. Red tape, I'll just say, as small business owners. So we'll talk about that a bit tonight. And Barbara Bry is originally from Philadelphia, where she earned her bachelor's from the University of Pennsylvania, and then she went on to do her MBA at Harvard. Barbara spent the bulk of her career in both technology as well as journalism, and sometimes where those two intersect. Notably, she was on the founding team of proflowers.com, which a lot of us know. And she's also dedicated much of her career to supporting other entrepreneurs, of course, through Connect, which a lot of us know well, and of course, as the co-founder of Athena, which is the premier group for women in high tech and life science here in San Diego. And most recently, she turned her attention in 2016 to solving the problems here for the city of San Diego. And she currently serves for District 1 as a council representative. So with that, we are going to dive into the questions. These questions were curated from our members over the last month. So question number 1, and Jill, I will get you ready to hit the button here. So question number 1, Todd, you're going to answer the first 6 first, and then we'll go to Barbara. So question 1, what more can the city of San Diego do to further support entrepreneurship in San Diego?
Well, Felina, first off, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. And to everyone who's tuned in this evening, God bless you for signing up for another hour on Zoom. I'm sure you spent all day on this platform, but you're here because you care deeply about the city. That's precisely why I'm running for mayor. Felina, to answer your question, first off, it starts off with having a well-functioning city. And I think that that really means a city that manages its finances appropriately, that repairs its roads, that is addressing the homelessness and housing affordability crisis. So there are some broad atmospherics that I think strong and positive leadership at City Hall can do to create better circumstances for entrepreneurship in our city. But beyond that, I think COVID has certainly shown us that entrepreneurial thinking is critical for businesses to stay afloat. These are dynamic times, you need dynamic people. However, more specifically for women, I think we need the infrastructure for those who are ready to jump into entrepreneurship to find success. And that would mean creating a network of programs such as Entrepreneurship and Innovation Catalyzer at our alma mater of USD, a program that builds entrepreneurs as they build their innovations. We should be promoting things like the San Diego Chamber of Commerce's All Our Talent initiative, which helps women to advance and appointed corporate and philanthropic and civic leadership roles. I'm proud to have the endorsement of our Chamber of Commerce in this election. And I'd just note that San Diego is a hotbed of innovators. We are folks who do this work already. We have the second largest number of patents in the country. We have a growing venture capital and talented people, but we can do more for women by making sure that they have on-ramps to these programs and make them accessible to them and actively promote women entrepreneurs in the spaces. And so I would hope to be able to work with groups like this one to do precisely that if I'm fortunate enough to be your mayor.
Brilliant. Thank you. Under time. Good job. Nicely done. All right, Barbara, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Felina. Well, my track record on entrepreneurship is clear. I've been supporting entrepreneurship in San Diego since 1986 when I joined the Connect program as Associate Director. I started Athena a few years later, first as an informal organization to support the advancement of women in tech and biotech and to support entrepreneurs. San Diego is a great place to be an entrepreneur. It's in our DNA. We have a supportive and collaborative culture. And here's what I will do as mayor. First of all, continue to be a role model for other women entrepreneurs. I know how challenging it is. As an entrepreneur, as a woman in fields that were dominated by men, I was told no over and over again. And I know that no is only a way station to yes, and that organizations like NAWBO are so important in building a supportive ecosystem so that when you get that rejection, which you get in the business world a lot, that you will stand up, you will have a support system around you, and you will push on and succeed. Our local economy is very, very dependent on tourism, and I want to grow the innovation economy that creates high-paying jobs and good service sector jobs around it. I want to expand tech and biotech downtown. I can talk more about it later, but it is going to happen. And that's why I think my background coming out of these worlds is so important at this time to be able to market San Diego to the world so that capital comes here, companies come here, which then will benefit the entire ecosystem in providing more opportunities for women businesses. I have realistic plans on how we can build more housing that working families can afford. And as mayor, I want to make sure that women get their fair share of city contracts. And I've supported the funding of a disparity program, a disparity study that is now underway. So we'll have a better idea of who gets our contracts and what we need to do to make sure that all businesses in San Diego can access them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barbara. All right. On to access to capital. Obviously critical for women in businesses. What can the city do to assist women in businesses in obtaining the capital they need to grow their business? Todd, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I heard the conversation before about the PPP program, and I think that another lesson from COVID-19 has been that business lacking robust relationships with financial institutions are at a serious competitive disadvantage generally, but especially during economic downturns like what we are experiencing right now. Underbanked businesses, particularly those run by women and women of color in less advantaged communities, don't have the banking relationships that they need to walk through applications, and as a consequence, miss out on their fair share of things like the PPP program. Banking in general is shifting to more digital services, closing branches, and instead of providing a web of services in communities. And so while all this is reflective of what's going on in our economy, I don't think it does any favors to a woman who's trying to start her business, starting out from scratch, perhaps out of her home, needing access to a line of credit at some point to grow her business. So I believe that we need to create better relationships with our banks and our female business leaders when starting their business accounts, to making sure that they have the financial infrastructure ready to set them up for success. Obviously, the city has deep relationships with banks and credit unions, where I think we can use the bully pulpit of the mayor's office to make sure that when a woman wants to step forward, that they have the opportunity to access the kinds of capital that's necessary. I think the other thing that we could do, and maybe not direct capital, but a way to have a better shot at getting some of these contracts, are things that we see our airport authority do, things in terms of providing bid performance and payment, bond guarantees, the kinds of stuff that gives a woman-owned business, a minority-owned business, a fighting chance to get a piece of that contract. While it's not direct cash, this is a direct way that local government can help businesses, particularly businesses that are disadvantaged, get a chance to build their business, grow their resources, and be able to be successful in San Diego.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Barbara, over to you.
Historically, women-owned businesses have not had access to outside capital from banks and venture capitalists, and they've had to rely on their credit cards, their friends and family, and this has hurt their ability to grow, which is bad for the overall economy, because if women-owned businesses could get access to the capital they need and deserve, it would create a bigger pie for all of us. So it's time to change this in San Diego, and I have the right background. I've raised money, and I know how hard it is. Here's what I will do as mayor. I will work with the Tech Coast Angels, which is now headed by a woman, I think the first time in history. And this is a group of individuals who invest in early stage companies. Through the Regional Community Investment Task Force, I will leverage the city's relationships with banks. If banks want to do business in the city of San Diego, they need to understand that they need to treat women customers equally and fairly, something that I understand has not been happening. I want to work with NAWBO and other organizations to assemble a list of lenders, banks, Acción, the Women's Empowerment Fund, individuals. The Jewish Community Foundation has put together a fund for women small business owners, and it's comprised of people who've contributed to the fund who want to loan money as individuals to women small business owners. And I will use my bully pulpit as mayor, which I have done my whole life. As mayor, I will continue speaking about the importance of investing in women-owned businesses to grow our local economy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. All right, on to what all of us as small business owners are going through at the moment, emergency regulations. So looking forward, should something like this, similar to the pandemic, happen again, what can you do, or what will you do to give us a speedy action to really back businesses in, reopening, operating, being able to do what they do? So speak to that. I'll start with you, Todd, please.
Sure. Well, I'm not waiting to become mayor to work on this issue. In fact, as your state legislator, I've been working hard since the beginning of the pandemic with groups like the California Restaurant Association, Little Italy Association, and other business groups to try and find ways to give every business a fighting chance to be able to stay open, keep their employees, and hopefully survive this crisis. And while we're not going to be 100% successful, we should never stop in our efforts to try and do this. What have I done? Well, immediately working with the Alcohol Beverage Control Bureau at the state, making sure that restaurants could have to-go cocktails to just provide additional profit margin to keep their doors open. Working with neighborhood associations like the Gas Lamp Quarter Association, Little Italy Association, to expand outdoor dining and providing enough tabletops and chairs that keeps some of the doors open, again, keeps more people employed. I've worked at the state level to get the Great Plates Delivered program. This is something that's putting restaurants back to work by providing nutritious meals to seniors who are homebound during this time. This is a win-win, addressing the issues of a vulnerable population susceptible to COVID-19 while putting more San Diegans back to work. I was at Cafe Madeline on El Cajon Boulevard, a woman-owned business, earlier today, serving meals with their employees. They were able to double their payroll because of this state-sponsored program. And all of these should be instructive on how we can work going forward. I think definitely the lessons learned on what the city can do. Regulatory hurdles are what are barriers to employment and to business on any given day. They can be particularly deadly during this pandemic. And you've seen the city waive fees, cut processing times, work through executive action to actually to remove barriers to businesses. And while there are many, I shudder to think about the number of businesses who would have been harmed if the city hadn't done this stuff, if the state hadn't done some of this stuff. I think going forward, a lot of this stuff is going to inform best practices on what we can do going ahead. I think one of the things we could incentivize is more contactless payment, more online opportunities to allow businesses to work in this virtual world when they're used to a brick and mortar experience. Oh, I'm so sorry, I went over my time. I just last say digital equity is a huge part of that, and the city can play a role with its franchisees to make sure that more people have access to online services.
Great, thank you, Todd. Over to you, Barbara.
It was clear that small businesses were disproportionately hurt by the pandemic. In the early days of the shutdown, you could go to Costco or Target and buy a book or a piece of clothing, but you couldn't go to your neighborhood retailer. And I never understood why. It made no sense to me because you could have easily gone to these places, worn a face mask, and been socially distanced. As mayor, I'm going to fight to make sure that our small businesses get equal treatment, that any decision about shutting down businesses is done with data. And that hasn't always been the case. As a council member, I have voted to waive fees, to speed up opening up businesses outdoors. And the city could, and as the mayor actually could have moved faster than the council could which has a legislative process. I worked with the restaurants on one block, on Avenida de la Playa in my council district, and the bureaucratic hurdles to trying to open up this one block for dining was enormous. And what I would have done as mayor is I would have gotten everybody in the room who had something to do with the situation and cut through the red tape immediately, held people accountable with a timeline. That's what's missing at City Hall right now, and that's what I will change as mayor. In addition, it's clear we have a zillion regulations, many of which we do not need. And as mayor, I am going to establish a small business task force to review all of our regulations, to determine which ones are onerous and which ones simply should be done away with to make your business lives easier.
Great, thank you so much, Barbara. All right, AB5, every entrepreneur's favorite topic. If folks aren't familiar with AB5, it is, regulates how contractors and employees are classified. So many women business owners are, freelancers, consultants, contractors. They've been acting in this fashion. What is your stance on AB5, a law that we would say disproportionately negatively affects diverse and women-owned businesses? Todd, you're up.
Well, Felina, I voted to support AB5 in the legislature, and I would change the characterization that you just said. Listen, there are problems with all kinds of laws, labor laws in California, but over 500,000 Californians have been misclassified. And I would argue that many of them are women who are not being paid a minimum wage, who are not being provided paid sick days, healthcare insurance, access to unemployment, and access to Social Security. And that has tremendous impacts on those women. And all those workers. The fact of the matter is AB5 is only part of the story. The Dynamex decision by the state Supreme Court, a unanimous decision of both Republican and Democratic appointees, created a new three-part test, which many employees, former independent contractors, no longer can satisfy. And AB5 was created to provide clarity of that opinion, to provide a business-to-business exemption for those who have truly sole proprietorship businesses in a true relationship in a contracting fashion, as well as exemptions for a lot of historic professions that have operated in an independent contractor fashion. I acknowledge that there continue to be concerns about the Dynamex decision and AB5, which is why we passed AB 2257 just a few days ago to further strengthen the business-to-business exemption, as well as to expand the number of professions that are not subject to the Dynamex decision. We will continue, I imagine the legislature will continue to make modifications to this. But Felina, when you look at the number of folks in the pandemic, people who lost employment, who needed access to unemployment insurance, but were shut out because their employers didn't pay into it, and as a consequence, their profits improved, and then the state has to pick up the tab. I think all of us are concerned about the long-term prospects of Social Security. It's not benefited when you have employers who are not paying into this system. And importantly, I think for those who are and who are likely to say in the next second that we should repeal AB5, I would remind folks that that actually puts us back to Dynamex, actually expanding the number of workers in California who are subject to the three-part test. So that's where we're at, and I think you'll see more progress on that in the years to come.
Great, thank you, Todd. Barbara, over to you.
So Felina, this is an honest policy difference between my opponent and me. And it clearly shows the fact that he has spent his entire life in government. He's never been in the private sector. He doesn't understand the new economy, the gig economy, and that many people want flexibility these days to do many different kinds of things. And I believe in worker protections. But what England did, which would have been the right approach, was to create a third category of worker who gets protections and benefits on a sliding scale, depending on the number of hours a week they work. This was the right approach. AB5 is fundamentally flawed. At the beginning, the exemptions were given to doctors, lawyers, real estate brokers, I think insurance agents, professions with, lobbyists. And there was this second bill that gave more exemptions. But we live in a new world where every day we're creating a new kind of a job. And so we need to create a new structure to deal with the new reality of the gig economy. And AB5 is flawed. It should have been repealed. And this third category of worker, it was the right approach to solving a complex problem. And as you've noted, many minority-owned businesses are opposed to AB5. It is a job killer. And what could happen is Lyft and Uber could pull out of California, which would hurt many people who depend on their services for shopping, for getting to their medical appointments. And it would also hurt many of the drivers who depend on the extra income. So I urge the legislature, I urge Todd to think about things in a new way. And that's what my entrepreneurial background has given me, the ability to approach things in new ways. And that's what I've been doing at City Hall, where there is a lot to fix.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, privacy protection. California Consumer Privacy Act is the first comprehensive privacy law in the US. We were preparing for it because Europe was ahead of us a bit on this one. Will you be supporting other privacy laws, and specifically, how would these laws affect women-owned businesses? You're up first, Todd.
Well, Felina, privacy is something that's very deeply important to me personally. The power of the government to have warrantless surveillance, the collection of personal identifying information, is something that has long been a concern of mine and something I've worked on in the legislature. I think the CCPA is an important and powerful piece of legislation, but the way it was created was not pretty. The fact of the matter is, a very wealthy man decided to collect a bunch of signatures on it for an initiative to create a much more intrusive and less workable measure. This was opposed by the business community. And so the legislature stepped in to make modifications to create what is the law as we currently understand it here in California and put it in its place. Policymakers have had to then come up and make further refinements to this law, recognizing the shortfalls that were in it and trying to make it work. And I think that's necessary before further expanding to other privacy laws. Here's an area where I think the city could lead on this, because this is a mayoral debate, is the fact that the city has collected a tremendous amount of surveillance equipment without any privacy use policies. That's a mistake. The Stingray, license plate readers, shotgun spotter, the list, street light cameras, these are all things the city has acquired, and it has not necessarily worked out well. It's that kind of backward looking approach that has gotten the city into trouble time and again. A lot of this has happened over the last 4 years, and so I would suggest there isn't necessarily a new attitude at City Hall. It's been a lot of the same. And if I may just go back to the previous question, Councilmember Bry, please do not disparage my career and my work on behalf of my community. I'm proud to have served in the public sector. I honor your work in the private sector. And I simply suggest that I have a deep concern about our public institutions and the taxpayers who are left holding the bag when corporations shortchange their employees. But it doesn't require you to disparage my work and what I've done for my community.
Thank you, Todd. All right, Barbara, privacy, over to you.
Sure. First, Mr. Gloria, I've just pointed out that you've spent your career in government, and
and there's nothing wrong with that, Councilman.
I didn't say there was anything wrong with it. That's where you've spent your career, and I know you are very dedicated to the city that you grew up in. But it's given you a limited number of experiences, and I've had a much more diverse life with much more diverse experiences, and I brought that to the city council, and I would bring that to mayor, and that's simply a fact. As a businesswoman, I'm very, very data-driven. And I think it's good that the CCPA gives consumers more control over their personal information and secures new privacy rights for consumers. Before I would support anything new, I would want to understand the impact. And I am supporting legislation at the City of San Diego right now. I've voted for it at the Public Safety Committee that will set up an independent commission of experts to review our current surveillance technology and any new technology that we might want to use, so that the community understands the impacts before we would enter into any new agreement on any new technology. And this commission will review all the existing technologies. And I have voted that the street lights technology, the video cameras, be turned off until this new commission is in place and can set appropriate policies on the use.
Great, thank you so much, Barbara. All right, last question where Todd will be taking the first spot is on procurement opportunities. What steps can be taken to ensure that women-owned businesses have increased access to contracts and subcontracts with the City of San Diego?
Well, I think there's a lot that we can do. And the first and most pressing thing is something that I hope all of your viewers are doing, which was voting yes on Proposition 16 this November. As many of you know, that would repeal Proposition 209 that has prohibited affirmative action in the state of California. And while that conversation often revolves around the concerns of Black and Brown communities, the fact of the matter is when you look at that, the impact of Prop 209, it has disproportionately harmed women-owned businesses. We believe that women-owned businesses lose over $1 billion worth of contracts, government contracts each year because of this ballot measure. And so I'm strongly supportive of Proposition 16, and I hope your members are too. I hope my opponent is as well. What I would say is that if it's repealed, it would give more tools to the city to be able to make sure that the over $500 million that we put out in contracts annually can be looked at with an equity lens, understanding whether women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and others are actually benefiting from these investments. And I think beyond that, the city should be partnering with groups like NAWBO, the Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Development Corporation, Axion, and others to make these business opportunities available and make small business owners aware of these opportunities. I think that I can't impress upon you enough to know that from my time on the city council, knowing how my hands were tied by Prop 209, we have worked together. My colleague, Assemblywoman Dr. Shirley Weber, who I'm proud to have the endorsement of in this campaign, is leading the charge on Prop 16. And again, that would give the next mayor an opportunity to really make sure that more of these contracts are spent amongst small businesses that are local, and many of them women and minority owned.
Thank you, Todd. Over to you, Barbara.
Yes, I support Proposition 16. California is one of only 8 states in the country in which does not allow race and gender to be among the issues that can be considered in awarding a contract or in admission to a state university. And it's time to change this. There's data out there that shows this will create a better economic environment for all of us. As a council member, I've already voted to fund a disparity study, which should be done by early January, and that will give us data on who gets our city contracts right now. Informally, I've been talking with small business owners, women and minority business owners about the issues and the challenges they face in dealing with the city of San Diego. Ironically, I've been told that the county of San Diego and the state of California are easier to deal with. That is unacceptable. So as mayor, as part of my small business task force, we are going to develop a contracting system that is fair, that is streamlined, and that gets the job done for both you, your businesses, and the taxpayers.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna switch it up a little bit. Barbara, you will be taking lead on our next 6 questions. Another hot button, of course, in the city of San Diego is caring for our homeless population. Many small businesses who have been dealing with the pandemic are also now dealing with, especially retailers, restaurants. I live in North Park and I see this quite often. We're dealing with folks sleeping on our doorsteps and so on. You know where I'm going with this. So what will you do as mayor to care for the homeless in a humane way and also help small business owners with the challenges that they're having?
Yeah, so first let me start with my own personal experience. On March 3rd, which was election day, I was in the southern part of the city. A gentleman walked up to me. He said, "I'm homeless, I want help." I called 211 San Diego. I was put on hold. I was transferred here and there. I was given different phone numbers to call. First of all, this gentleman did not have a cell phone. This was like craziness, especially if you were homeless and you wanted help and you wanted to get into a shelter. He told me his story. He had lost his job a year ago. His wife had left him. He was living with his sister. He'd been drinking. He admitted he had become violent, and his sister had dropped him off a mile away. She simply couldn't handle it anymore, nor should she have needed to. There should have been one phone number, one place I could have easily called to get this gentleman the help he needed. As mayor, I'm going to fix that. There's no one size fits all to our homeless issue. We must help each individual, addressing the root causes, which for a growing number of people is sadly mental health and substance abuse. I'm very honored that Father Joe has endorsed me because it was his approach to helping our homeless. We need to work more collaboratively with the county, which provides all of our mental health services, and we need to make sure that we have data so that the programs that perform get funded and those that don't get funded anymore. It's time to hold our service providers accountable for measured results. And the good news is the convention center has been working in terms of more collaboration with the city and the county, and the city is able to now to access state money to buy hotels, of which, they're not having a great time right now. We're able to buy hotels at a very reasonable price to move homeless individuals from the convention center there by the end of the year.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Over to you, Todd.
Well, Felina, I think it's important on this particular issue that is so difficult to acknowledge that there are cities across this nation that are being certified by the federal government as ending chronic homelessness. Cities like Provo, Utah, Rockford, Illinois, the state of Virginia for veteran homelessness. If those communities can do it, surely we can too. I think the challenge in San Diego has been that the approach has not been driven by best practices, things that are not like Housing First, which are a proven national best practice for getting people off the streets. Too much of our money has gone to things like bankrupted indoor skydiving facilities purchased without an appraisal from politically connected developers that house nobody, $7 million that house nobody for the homeless. I mean, that's the current approach. We need a different approach. What I would say is when you look at those communities that have seen transformational change, there are some common denominators in those situations. Number one, strong executive leadership. In those cities, the mayor is very clear. This is their top priority. This is what they expect to see change on. You will see that from my administration. Number two, data and transparency. We must demand that those who get money from the city prove that they can get people off the streets and keep them off the streets. If they can, they get more money. If they can't, they shouldn't get any money. This is how Houston, Texas got a 60% reduction in on-street homelessness without spending additional funds. The way you solve homelessness is housing plus services. The city has a housing commission. The county has health and human services. We need to work better together. I'm honored to have the endorsement of County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. He believes that I'm the candidate he can work with to reset this relationship and get change on homelessness. Importantly, 2/3 of our region's homeless are in the city of San Diego, but 1/3 of them are in the other smaller cities. We must work with the other mayors to make sure that our coordinated efforts are resulting in people getting off the streets. I don't think you care what side of the city limit they're on. You want them housed. And lastly, we must build more housing because many of our homeless are mentally ill and have substance abuse, but many of them, Felina, are simply poor. They live in their cars, they live in RVs. We have to build more housing. That is my plan for homelessness. If we can follow that plan, I believe we can join the ranks of cities that have successfully tackled this problem.
Great. I look forward to it. Thank you. All right, we're coming back over to the topic of economic recovery, a very hot topic for small businesses. Obviously, we had the Paycheck Protection Program for a period of time. Many small businesses in San Diego took advantage of that, but that money ran out very quickly. So again, back to the question, what can be further done to assist business owners during this difficult time? You're up first, Barbara.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to add one more thing about homelessness. When my opponent was sworn in for a second term on the council, he promised to end chronic homelessness downtown. And according to the Downtown Partnership at that time, there were 593 unsheltered individuals downtown. During his last 4 years on the council, the number increased to over 1,400. And I have the data right here from the Downtown Partnership. I mean, any individual on the street is one too many. But the numbers did go up during his last 4 years because the winter tent was closed during the rest of the year and other things were done that moved the city toward housing first, but away from programs that had been working. For women business owners, I understand the Paycheck Protection Program actually didn't help some. Many women business owners were not able to access it. As a council member, I voted to support putting millions of dollars of federal stimulus money into a fund for small business assistance. I think the most important thing we can do is allow small businesses to open safely and to provide certainty that they'll be able to stay open. It's also important to encourage residents to shop local and to use services that are locally owned. For example, my council office every week puts out a newsletter featuring different small business owners in my council district. And anecdotally, we've heard back from them that this has helped them generate new business. And as mayor, I'll be out there all over the city at our many small businesses, showcasing the great opportunities that our residents have to support them.
Thank you, Barbara. Todd?
You know, Felina, it is so easy to criticize from the cheap seats. You know, I don't recall Councilmember Bry having an interest in the issue of homelessness prior to her deciding to run for mayor. In fact, it is interesting to note that her district has precisely 0 units of permanent supportive housing proposed or planned. That is the critical way that we get people off the streets. And so if you want to be a part of the solution, Councilmember Bry, I would suggest that your district has opportunities to house these individuals. And I hope that you'll take that up with your remaining time in office. If we can get to the actual question though, rather than attacking each other, I would point out that our economic recovery would best be suited by having a different president. What the fact of the matter is that what has been done to date has been inadequate. And as was being discussed before Councilmember Bry got onto the line, the federal government has not really passed substantial additional relief for too long. $1,200 a month is not sufficient for anyone to survive. I'm sorry, $1,200 at one time is not enough for someone to survive for 6 months. It's just inadequate. And the PPP program has had a host of problems, and I think it is evident that there are a lot of folks who did well with that program, but not a lot of them are small business owners or women-owned business or minority-owned businesses. I support Congressman Scott Peters' plan to re-up and reform the PPP program. I'm proud to have his endorsement in this campaign. Congressman Peters was the co-chair of my plan for recovery, the Back to Work SD plan, which is on my website at toddgloria.com. I'd ask you to check it out. But he's suggesting, and I agree, that we should expand loan forgiveness expenses from 8 weeks to 24 weeks and extending the rehiring deadlines, increasing the current limitations on the use of the loan for non-payroll expenses from 25% to 40%, to extend this program to December 31st, and to extend the loan terms from 2 years to 5 years. There are a host of modest modifications that can make a real difference for small business owners, and that's what must happen. But as we know, the lack of federal leadership has been terrible for small business. We need a new president.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, on to industry upheaval. The retail industry, of course, has gone through significant upheaval and is having obviously far-reaching effects for supply chain, logistics, importing, commercial leasing, and jobs. So what can be done to address the new normal, and how can we move forward? You're up first, Barbara.
Yeah. So some of this overlaps with the last question about how are we going to support our small businesses to keep them functional. I happened to visit small business owners on West Lewis Street in Mission Hills, and they did talk about the Paycheck Protection Program and the limits, their frustration in dealing with banks, and just worried about how they were going to stay open and serve customers, who hopefully would be coming back. And sadly, some of them aren't going to come back. And we've seen many workers are working remotely, which actually is a good thing in many ways. It's going to allow us to meet our climate action plan goals more easily. It reduces congestion, it improves air quality, and for many families, it gives them additional flexibility that they appreciate. And even after the pandemic ends, many employees would like to continue working remotely. And I want the city to be a model for a remote workforce. Maybe people want to go into the office 1 or 2 days a week, but it's better for them and better for their lives to be able to work from home. This is going to create opportunities for adaptive reuse of office and commercial buildings as housing. And this housing was much less expensive than building new. It could be both for sale housing, could be rental housing. This has been done in other cities. I've been in beautiful buildings in Chicago and downtown Los Angeles that were office buildings years ago that are now beautiful apartments and condominiums. And this is a great way to provide more housing for San Diegans.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Todd.
Well, again, I would refer folks to the plan that we've published, Back to Work SD. It's available on my website, toddgloria.com. And we do discuss some of this transitionary issues. I mean, there's the obvious from the built environment that as folks choose to stay home more, as retail suffers, particularly as it was struggling beforehand and obviously made much worse now, that we're going to need to find ways for the city to thoughtfully streamline the conversion of these properties to residential or to office, to the other kinds of things that are in more demand. While the state can play a thoughtful and helpful role in this regard, I think obviously the city does the permitting and there's a way that we can help do that. Felina, I'm very concerned about this particular issue because as a North Park resident, you know precisely what happens when you have vacant storefronts. You know what occurs when there's a gap in the activity on the streets, and whether or not the city is being thoughtful and aggressive in helping people to make those conversions, to find new tenants, it's going to be really important. But more than the built environment, it's how we can help small businesses actually compete in this environment. I was trying to speak to this a moment ago. You know, obviously, other countries don't always use cash the way that Americans do, and actually helping businesses find their way to convert, particularly going back to what I was saying a moment ago about the lack of strong and deep relationships with financial institutions. Both the technology and the relationships are areas that could leave small businesses at a competitive disadvantage, and that may make the difference between staying open or closing. I think that we can play a role in being helpful there. Additionally, the digital divide issue and making sure that these folks can do as much as they possibly can online so that they can stay alive. Yes, a brick and mortar experience, but a potential of shifting some of that to meet new customer expectations. I think it's an exciting time. It's a scary time, but it's also an exciting time. It's a potential for innovation, and government should be a partner in assisting with that. And I would hope to have that be a hallmark of my administration.
Great, thank you. On to another important topic, childcare. Many women business owners are struggling with this. Many families, men included, affordable quality childcare is an issue. So what can the city do to ensure working parents have access to needed childcare at a rate they can afford? Barbara, you're first.
Yeah, so this issue is really close to my heart. I was raised by a single working mother. And I became a single working mother when my two daughters were 8 and 11. So I've personally experienced the issues of trying to find affordable childcare. One thing the city has done is we invested $5 million of the federal stimulus money into childcare for essential workers. I mean, this is a small amount, but it's a start. Employers have told me that help with childcare is the single most important issue for their employees, and families need more options that are affordable. One of the best ways to improve access is to promote and nurture the formation of more childcare businesses. And these are businesses that are largely women-owned. Years ago, I visited a program at Southwestern College that was like a 10-week certificate program. You learned how to start a childcare business in your home. You learned what all the requirements were. You learned how to market your business. You learned even how to ask people for money, to make sure that you collected what was owed to you. And I think programs like this are excellent in helping more businesses to get started, and then making sure that if families need access to capital to do some renovations in their house, that they can get loans through Axion and other community-based programs. And it's wonderful that a San Diego startup called Tutris provides working families with online resources for free so that they can identify and enroll their children in safe and affordable childcare programs. And it also offers the providers sort of an automated back end so that they don't have to worry about doing all the bookkeeping themselves. And as mayor, I will work closely with the San Diego County Child Care Eligibility List that allows subsidized child development agencies to find parents and children who are eligible for their programs. This is a really important issue in allowing our economy to move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. Todd?
So Polina, my back to work SD task force came from the public and private sector, military professionals, healthcare professionals, folks in the binational space. All of them came to the same conclusion. Our economy cannot reopen until our schools and our childcare centers reopen. Too many parents, particularly women, are unable to go back to work because they don't have a safe place for their children to be during the day. It's that lack of options, particularly childcare options, that really feels like we're not prioritizing families or children in this recovery. The restaurants are reopened, but we haven't sent our kids back to school, and that just doesn't feel right. I think that it's obvious that we had a shortfall in childcare resources before the pandemic. And in many ways, this has gotten worse. When I talk to childcare providers up and down the state, what I hear is stories of childcare providers turning to their credit cards to stay afloat during these challenging times. And as I mentioned before, we need additional federal relief. Childcare providers are asking Congress for $25 to $50 billion to try and stay afloat at this time. And again, if we're interested in stimulating the economy, I think one of the best ways to do it is to allow employees and employers, job creators, to be able to get back to work. And that involves making sure their children have some place to go. What can the city do? Well, the city is a permitter, right? The city permits childcare facilities. We can work to try and make that process more seamless, recognizing the acute need that there is at this time. We can work with the county and with the state to try and find reforms to licensure to make sure that we're making sure our children are safe, but that we have more of these slots available, particularly at the ages of newborn to 2, where the deficit is absolutely the largest. And lastly, I would say Councilmember Bree is spot on. Tutris is an amazing local startup. It is a woman-owned business and women-owned led, and I'm proud to have her endorsement in this campaign.
Thank you. All right, 2 more questions, and Diana is helping us out with questions that have come from our attendees. So if we have a moment to get to those, we will do that. Barbara, our border economy. So what will you do to strengthen our partnership with Mexico, specifically as it relates to business opportunity?
Yes, our location on the border is an economic opportunity for San Diego. I recognized this many years ago when I worked at the Connect program. I created a program called Cross Border Connect. This was in the early 90s, that brought together entrepreneurs and researchers, particularly in software and telecom. And it was pioneering at the time because many of these people had never talked to each other before. The program just sort of went away because of the economic issues on both sides of the border, but the relationships continued. And I will build on those relationships to have more synergy between San Diego and Tijuana, and particularly in the technology and the life science space. We have invested in upgrading border crossing facilities. I mean, that is a federal government responsibility. It's important to make the legal movement of people and goods as seamless and as efficient as possible. As mayor, I will have a senior level director in my office who will work with businesses and government officials in Baja so that we have good relationships and that we know that we can call on each other when we need to. And I think about during the pandemic, at the beginning, I think it was a rocky relationship between San Diego and Baja. I think we should have had COVID testing more quickly opened up on our side of the border. And I think there are other things we could have done early on more quickly to better partner with Mexico.
Great, thank you. Todd?
So Felina, much like our economy can't reopen until our schools and childcare centers reopen, it is true that San Diego's economy will not reopen until our border reopens. And all of the concerns that we've talked about today in terms of the experiences of small businesses and particularly women-owned businesses are acutely felt by the small businesses in San Ysidro, which is a part of the city of San Diego. And as I've done walking tours of with the Chamber of Commerce in that community, you see what the ongoing closure of our border has meant for that economy and by extension, the broader San Diego economy. I have promoted as a member of the legislature, making sure that just as California has sent ventilators and PPE to other states that have been acutely infected by COVID, I've advocated for doing the same with our partners in Baja, recognizing that they are just as much a part of our ability to protect the public health and defeat COVID-19. I will continue that advocacy going forward. I would note that in my time as a city council member and as a state legislator, I've had the honor of representing our community in Mexico, building relationships in Baja, in Tijuana, in Mexico City, relationships that I believe will make me well prepared to serve as mayor and take the border as what it is, which is an asset for our region, not the negative thing that the president too often likes to make it out to be. I think going forward, what we have to do is partner to promote international public health. Obviously, safety has to come first. And secondarily, but also importantly, is increase international trade and investment. I'd point out that the city of San Diego has supported the World Trade Center San Diego Metro Connect program, a relatively modest grant program that has assisted 20 companies just last year to sign 369 new contracts, leading to 97 more jobs in our community because of trade. This is the kind of ways the city can make a small investment to make a big return, and we should be doing more of that, particularly as we try and pull our economy out of the ditch that has been created by this pandemic.
Great, thank you. Last question that was sourced from our members, and then if we have a moment, Diana, I'll come back over to you. Everyone's favorite topic, traffic. Although it's gotten better over the last 6 months. Can we believe that, right? So it's coming back. I drive down the 805 and now I'm starting to cringe, right? So Barbara, you first, what will you do to improve transportation?
So first of all, I'm going to continue to promote a regional workforce with thousands of people working remotely. And I want the city to be a model. This will reduce congestion, it will improve air quality, and it will allow us to meet our climate action plan goals more easily. I don't support the path Sandag is moving on to spend $177 billion with plans to dig underneath many of our neighborhoods to create fixed rail that I'm not sure enough people will use to make it economically viable. If you want to see the future, you go to UCSD, where they are testing autonomous vehicles. They're electric, they're small. When we do have smart highways, they're going to be able to be very close together, and people are going to be able to get in them easily to go to their final destination. This is the future. When you go to the Voight trolley stop at UCSD, they are designing it so that autonomous vehicles will be able to pull up, and one may say Salk Institute, one may say UCSD Library. This is the future. It's happening at UCSD. I have also supporting increased density along existing transit corridors. I've voted to update the community plan in Mission Valley and the Midway area and Morena Boulevard, and putting more housing where we already have existing transit is another way of reducing congestion. I think as mayor, I'm going to pay attention to data. And as I talked about the adaptive reuse, again, that will be in areas where we already have existing infrastructure. And there's new data out that shows we probably don't need as many housing units as we thought. many, many less, according to a new report out by the Embarcadero Institute. And this is going to be very important in how we do our planning going forward.
Great, thank you. Todd.
So Felina, yeah, I appreciate your observation. I share it. It got a little bit easier there for a while, but it's coming back again. And I think for those who felt like we can sort of surrender on moving forward with a world-class transportation system for our community, we're dead wrong. You see that people are going back into commuting back to work, and that's going to create congestion that the next mayor is going to have to address. And let's just be really direct. It doesn't matter if you're driving the car or if the car is being driven by a computer. Either way, you're sitting in traffic. And so what we have to do is build a world-class transportation system for our world-class community. And that means that you actually have choices when it comes from getting from A to B. If we were to have had this debate in person, all of us would likely have come to whatever meeting place in a car because we had no other choice. We should be building opportunities for people to walk on smooth sidewalks and well-lit communities, building protected bikeways so that you don't have to ride a bicycle in fear for your life, the opportunity to take quality public transit that is time and cost competitive, and yes, to drive your car if that's what you want and that's what works best for you. The status quo approach that my opponent supports, it will cost taxpayers over $130 billion. And it is true that a world-class vision is more expensive, but the difference is that we have the opportunity to preserve our climate and and meet our climate action plan goals. We can invest in economic development to allow our economy to grow because it's not constricted by the restraints posed on us by traffic. And importantly, Felina, we will protect our quality of life, what sets us apart from Los Angeles and from other cities, because we won't be miserable sitting in traffic hours and hours every single night. I believe that we can be a world-class city, but in order to do it, we need a world-class transportation system. And while others will tell you not now, later, 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 you and I both know that in San Diego, later often becomes never. We have to start this work today because a system like what we're describing will take decades to build, and the time to start doing that is now.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Todd Gloria. Thank you, Barbara Bry. I know we are at time, just a hair over time here. So I ask, do you want to hang on for a moment to take a few questions from the audience, or would you like us to send those to you and then you can respond to those?
Whatever. I'm happy to stay.
Okay. I know the two of you probably see each other more than you do your partners. So thank you for staying on a few more minutes with us. So Diana, I'm going to have you come off mute and come back on video and go ahead and, some of the top questions that came in perhaps.
Sure. So there was one question that was asked. It actually impacts women landlords, women business owners in these areas. And it also relates to the issue of lack of housing and homelessness. And the question really has to do with what will you do to enforce the municipal codes against short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods outside of beach communities? And so I guess we can start with Todd for that question.
Sure. Well, I mean, I support enforcing the law. This mayor and this council have not been capable of doing that. But I think more importantly, this is kind of the small town thinking that too often guides San Diego. Because I'd point out that most other cities have successfully regulated short-term vacation rentals. Ours has not. And I think that's a failure of leadership. The fact of the matter is right now the city council could pass an ordinance if it wanted to. But in some ways it seems like people just want to exploit this issue for political gain. The city council should act now to pass regulations. If they're incapable of doing that, I will work quickly in my first term to get that passed. And ultimately what we have to do is to make sure that through a series of fines, fees, and taxes, that we can have the robust enforcement that is necessary to address the quality of life impacts that too often come with this use. That means that you have the ability to call somebody on a weeknight, on a weekend, and get a response and get the problem taken care of. I would remind people that when I was on the city council, I entered City Hall with over 200 illegal dispensaries in our city. The city had spent over a decade ignoring the fact that compassionate use had been legalized by California voters. I brought together stakeholders to pass a first in the city's history ordinance to regulate this. And we now have this as a situation where this is a well-regulated industry that no longer has the impacts that people previously observed. By having strong regulations with strict enforcement, we got the problem under control. We can do the same with short-term vacation rentals. People just have to put the politics aside and actually get to work. And that's what I will do if this mayor and this council are incapable of doing that.
Great, thank you, Barbara.
Todd, we don't need a new law. We have a law. Our existing municipal code prohibits them in residential neighborhoods. And one reason I'm running for mayor is because I'm frustrated that the current mayor won't enforce the existing municipal code, and I don't have the authority to do it as a council member. We're talking about 16,000 single family homes. That's $1 billion worth of housing. Many of these units in neighborhoods like Point Loma, Ocean Beach, Pacific Beach, smaller units that are affordable to working families and young professionals. They belong back in the housing market for San Diegans to live in. So yes, it's just time to enforce our existing laws and bring these housing units back to the market. And that's what I will do as mayor. In looking at your campaign contributions, it's interesting to see that Airbnb and similar companies have given money to the committees supporting you. So perhaps that's why you are suggesting that the city pass regulation allowing them. Other cities have enforced their existing municipal code, a code similar to San Diego's, and make them illegal in our residential neighborhoods. Our residential neighborhoods are for San Diegans to live in. Hotels are for tourists, and I love tourists. I want them to come here and spend money and have a great experience and stay in a hotel.
Thank you. Let's take one more question, Diana, and then we will wrap it up.
All right, very good. The last question, we talked earlier about the needs of childcare in the city, but specifically we wanted to see your thoughts of how the city can assist mom CEOs who are dealing with remote learning. They never thought they would have to deal with childcare issues at this point. And so what assistance can the city provide during this remote learning environment? And we'll start with Barbara for this question.
So I have my daughter Rachel and her husband Daniel are both school teachers here, and actually the bonus in our life is they're having identical twin boys in March. That'll be our grandchildren number 6 and 7. So we talk a lot about remote learning and how it's impacting families. I think that the most important thing we can do is get through COVID and get our schools open safely. It's been interesting to see that smaller school districts are opening, some private schools are opening, some of the campuses are opening for special education students, and I think the priority should be on getting our schools open. It's children in disadvantaged neighborhoods who are suffering the most because of not being able to have an in-person learning experience. I understand that many families are turning to learning pods and other kinds with other families in order to make sure their children have an engagement with other children and can learn. But ultimately, you know, that may work for some people, but I think ultimately we have to get the schools back open in a safe way.
Great, thank you. Todd.
Yeah, Diana, I appreciate that question, and I would start by just acknowledging the temporary nature of this situation. We will get through this. The question is, can we do stuff to make people's lives a bit easier during this time? You know, and whether it's the provision of laptops and hotspots to students to try and bridge this gap, to efforts to, you know, open up nonprofits who are serving as a sort of breach in some of these cases, to fill in the breach in some of these cases. The city can play a facilitating role. But, you know, the most important thing we can do is reopen our schools. You know, I'm proud to have the endorsement of our city's teachers because they trust me to get this issue right. And what I would go back to is very much what I was saying before about the need for federal relief. This is not unique to San Diego or to California. This is a national concern. And as you mentioned, our private schools are opening sooner, but they're able to do that because they have smaller student population size and they're better resourced. So they can afford the PPE, they can pay for the additional cleaning, they can have regular testing. And the school districts like San Diego Unified simply don't have the resources. If the federal government would pass an additional stimulus, and I would say as a state legislator, and the state needs resources, but I would ask them to give the money first to our schools so they can hire the nurses and the custodians and have the testing and the PPE to get the schools reopened. I mentioned already, the economy will not reopen until our schools reopen. And so those mom CEOs who are dealing with this, my heart goes out to you. I get what you're dealing with. My own family is dealing with their challenges with my nieces and nephews. But ultimately, the solution is in reopening our schools. And while, of course, we want a vaccine, the fact of the matter is these other schools are able to reopen because of the resources they have. And we are out here still waiting for a federal government that cannot come together and get the job done. I'm hopeful that that will not be the case for too much longer, because our schools need to reopen. Our children are suffering. Virtual learning is good, but it is a sore substitute for in-classroom instruction. And that's why we have to put our kids first.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Todd Gloria, Barbara Bry, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for spending a few more minutes with us to take a few questions from our attendees. Thanks to everybody who joined us on Zoom or is watching on Facebook. The National Association of Women Business Owners is proud to bring you events like this that affect women business owners in San Diego and nationally. Thank you, Diana, for your help today. Thank you so much, Jill Rowan, the finger that you saw on our timer. Jill's there helping us out. We're all hanging out here at Hera Hub Mission Valley.
Oh, where I visited you many times.
Yes, exactly. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. And we will pull any other questions together and send those to each of you in case you do want to address those in any way, and we can get that out to our community. So thank you everybody for attending, and we hope to see you at one of our Brava Award panel releases over the next couple Fridays. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Felina.
Thank you.